Hello, everybody. My name is Barbara Güdecke, and I'm one of the experts in autonomous language learning at the Language Center of the University of Padua. Welcome to this third webinar of the series 9 Months, 9 Universities. 9 Months, 9 Universities is a series of webinars organized within the framework of Work Package 11 in the ARCUS European University Alliance. The ARCUS Alliance brings together the universities of Granada, Graz, Leipzig, Lyon, Minho, Maynooth, Padua, Wrocław, and Vilnius. 9 universities who share academic, scientific, and cultural objectives, a common vision of the role of higher education and research, and mutual fields of interest. Together, the partner universities are building an innovative and inclusive approach to education, research, and innovation. Work Package 11 is the plurilingual and intercultural hub, and the aim of this work package is to promote plurilingualism and to foster intercultural competences amongst the universities of the Alliance. The webinars of 9 Months, 9 Universities series focus on specific topics related to language and culture and target mainly graduate and postgraduate students, as well as early-stage researchers, staff of the universities, and everyone who's interested in those topics. The webinars are intended to generate awareness and appreciation for the topic of multilingualism, as well as an understanding of the many areas of our lives that are related to and influenced by language and culture. Let me now introduce you to the speaker of today's webinar, Drama Activities for Intercultural Dialogue and Inclusion, Fiona Diel from the University of Padua. Fiona is Associate Professor of English Language and Translation at the University of Padua, where she teaches on bachelor and master degree programs in modern languages. Her research interests include promoting learner autonomy, translanguage in English medium instruction, and the use of drama in language learning. Fiona is a member of the editorial board of Language Learning in Higher Education, the Journal of Circles, the European Confederation of Language Centers in Higher Education, and has been coordinator of Padua University English Drama Group for over 20 years. Last but not least, she is the academic coordinator at the University of Padua of Work Package 10 of the ARCUS Alliance, ARCUS Inclusion and Diversity Hub. In drama activities for intercultural dialogue and inclusion, Fiona will explore the potential of process drama, an approach that has been used in a variety of educational contexts, including that of language learning, focusing on the concept of intercultural dialogue for fostering inclusion. In process drama, facilitators and participants co-construct the story. The aim is not to create a performance for public viewing, and the activities remain within the space of the classroom. And during the same session, participants go in and out different roles, stepping into other people's shoes and viewing the world from different points of view and perspectives. At the end of the presentation, we will have some time to answer your questions, and I would just like to remind you to write those questions in the chat. And now I will hand over the floor, or rather the screen, to Fiona Diel from the University of Padua.
Thank you very much, Barbara, for that introduction. Okay, so as Barbara has said, I am interested in the role of drama activities for language learning, and I've been doing a lot of work on that over the years. But recently, I've turned some attention to the role of drama in our international universities as a means to enhance intercultural dialogue and inclusion. So this is what I'm going to be reflecting on with you, sharing some of my reflections with you today. So starting off from our context, which you are obviously familiar with, the context is the drive towards internationalization in higher education and the fact that this has brought about changes in the academic landscape, and we have increasingly seen ourselves becoming multilingual and multicultural university environments, which can be seen from the linguistic landscape that you can see here in our canteen sign. And here you can see a language portrait of one of our students. So our students are bringing their plurilingualism to our classrooms. Also, one thing to keep in mind, the context for this particular study is the fact that, as with migration, there are push and pull factors involved in the decision to study abroad and where to study. And as Barbara mentioned, I am involved in ARCUS Work Package 10. And in our previous ARCUS, I was also involved in the drawing up of the ARCUS framework, the integrated plan for refugees and students at risk. So I think it's always important to remember that some of our students may be at risk because of possible threats to their well-being or academic freedom in their home countries. This is a backdrop to some of the work I've been doing. Now, moving on to my interest in drama in language learning, there are actually different terms used for drama in language learning. We find embodied learning or embodiment. And as Erika Piazzoli says here, embodiment in education relates to a kind of learning experience grounded in the mind, senses, body, imagination, reflection, and social sphere. And Manfred Schever says that performative, he uses the term performative as an umbrella term to describe forms of foreign language teaching and learning that derive from the performing arts. On the right, you can see three, for people who are interested in going into greater depth, three works that you could look at about the role of drama or performative approaches for language learning. But staying with this field, just briefly, what are some of the benefits of performative approaches to language learning? I've just listed a few for you here, and once again, with some relevant bibliography. There's the fact that we are engaged in authentic language use. It provides an opportunity for task-based learning, for negotiating meaning, to enhance pragmatic competence, and also vocabulary learning. It involves clearly both verbal and non-verbal communication, so it can be used to develop pronunciation, rhythm, intonation, and also body language. There's also the issue of lowering the affective filter, which is so important in language teaching and learning. And there have been studies into the relationship between drama approaches and empathy, in confidence and motivation. And my last two categories here is one of collaboration. It's a collaborative approach which entails commitment. It is an approach which can create a sense of community, of trust, and belonging. And belonging is a word which will be coming up later as well. And then we have agency and engagement. We're talking about an action-oriented approach, which implies participation, experimentation, and a creative use of language and culture, just to name a few. Now, Barbara's already mentioned something about what I'm talking about, process drama, as you will have seen in the abstract. So here, I have actually also been involved in a theatre group where the goal is to put on a production, and I work with a director from a local theatre group. But here I'm talking about an approach where there's no final performance. So as the name obviously tells us, it's the process that is important, not the final product. Now, in process drama, your participants will create some kind of story, starting from what is called a pretext. And there has to be some kind of dramatic tension so as to keep people engaged in this story. As I've said, there's no final performance, no script, no external audience. What happens very often, which is interesting, is a status reversal between the teacher and the student. The teacher may actually play a role, a technique which is called teacher in role, in the drama, in the story making. And this role may be of a lower status from that of the students. So the students become the experts of the situation. Generally, we have a series of scenic units, which could be called episodes. And it's important that participants go in and out of role. So they experience the drama and then they reflect on it. There's also another issue which I won't have time to go into, but it's important to bear in mind. You know, students are stepping into someone else's shoes, and this does create distance between them and the character that they are embodying. And this emotional distance can actually be a form of protection, which maybe we'll go into later during this presentation. And just to quote Erika Piazzoli's summary of process drama, in process drama, we are not trying to find a happy ending. We're not trying to fix anything. We're considering a given issue from multiple viewpoints. Some of the activities, now clearly there are a lot of different activities that can be incorporated into this approach. Innumerable activities, just a few, because I will be mentioning these also later on. There is the still image, the use of tableau, where participants have to create something. It could be a whole story, it could be a mood, a concept, but they do this with their bodies, with no movement and no sound. Groups of students form a still image, a photograph of what they are portraying. And this can be used very often in our story creation. We have what is called a soundscape. Now, in a soundscape, each student adds a sound, not from an instrument, but from themselves, with their voices, with their bodies, touching things. And by adding sounds one at a time, you can create the atmosphere for your story, be it in a forest or in a seaside resort. There is also what's known as the gossip mill, which is a kind of Chinese whispers, because it involves the participants talking about what is going on. So something has happened in our village. What is it? Who are these strange people who've just arrived? And the students go around and they gossip, and the story changes. And as happens very often, the original story is distorted to some extent. Now, students in a process drama will enter into some kind of role, so we can have a hot seat activity, so that when you're sitting on the hot seat, you become your character and other people can interact with you and find out more about this character. And as actually you can see in this photograph, one activity which is often used is the conscience alley, where a person walks through a row of other learners, and these learners have to verbalize what that person is thinking at this particular moment. It could be a key moment in the story, and so you get into your character's mind. Now, given this particular context of our university settings with, as I've said before, our participants, our students, bringing a wealth of linguistic resources to the classroom, you may be using your drama to enhance language skills in a particular language, French, English, German, whatever. But that doesn't mean that other languages don't have to be present in the drama. And this is something which I found students really appreciate, because they like bringing something of themselves, of their homes, into the classroom, rather than, as one of my students said, leaving their home outside the classroom. So here, this is an example of a language portrait of one of the students. And then something I very often do as a kind of warm-up activity, either on paper or online, I ask students to provide terms in their own language. On the piece of paper that you can see, it was a drama session actually based on a poem where the issue that we were exploring was that of fear, and the students, the participants, wrote the word for fear in their own languages. On the word cloud, you can see words which were offered related to a storm which had come into our story. So I think it's always important. Another issue I'm interested in, but I won't be talking about today, is the use of translanguaging in drama approaches. So to go on, now another issue which I think is important to a concept to unwrap a little bit, because it's a word which is used very often. I think it's good to take a step back, as we do in drama approaches, and look at it and maybe unwrap it a little bit. It's often said that drama approaches can enhance empathy, but what exactly do we mean? I liked this definition of empathy involving the automatic and instinctive process of sensing the other's emotion and allowing it to resonate with us. It also entails the cognitive process of imagining the other's experience and emotional state and how it impacts her experience and perspective on the world, as well as comparing what we assess intellectually to what we are sensing effectively. I think it's important to think of empathy in this terms of with the emotional and the cognitive dimension. Also, Aidan talks about empathy in intercultural communication and mentions putting ourselves in someone else's place whilst consciously remaining ourselves. So very much we've got this, once again, cognitive emotional combination and saying that it involves taking control of one's emotion, listening to others whilst remaining aware of oneself, which is different from sympathy. So this empathy will crop up later on in this presentation, this short presentation. Now I'd like to give a practical example of a workshop which I have conducted this year and last year, and the birth of this workshop is actually thanks to Arcus, because I was asked to, once again, Barbara asked me to deliver it online. This was in 2022 to administrative and academic staff members of the Arcus Alliance partner universities. And I was here involved with two very, very dear colleagues from the University of Padova, Denada Dedia and Angela Solda, who I'd like to thank. Then after this, I have obviously changing, as one always changes and adapts everything. I have conducted this workshop with 6 groups of international students taking part in the Global Citizenship Programme here in Padua, organized by the Global Engagement Office. I have used it in person in a class, a master's class of the degree program English Studies, and also most recently with another smaller group of international students taking part in a process drama workshop. So what exactly is the Suitcase? We started from here. The participants were sent these instructions before the workshop. They had to imagine they were going on a long journey. They didn't know when they were coming home. They had a suitcase which was already packed with essential items, and they had time to add 3 objects. And these 3 objects were things which could be useful, but also were 3 objects which had some kind of emotional, personal value. So this was the starting point. So during the workshop, obviously after a series of warm-up activities, The students, first of all, had to imagine their suitcase. Very simply, they sat in silence, listening to some music, and created the image of a suitcase in their mind. Was it big? Was it small? Red, yellow? What color? Old, smooth, lumpy, broken wheels, whatever. They had time to focus on their suitcase. And then they took their suitcase around the room, walking through different weather and different contexts. So this was the scene setting. Then in small groups, with their 3 objects they'd chosen, they actually had to pack their suitcase. So they had to put their 3 objects, either drawing them or physically placing them or placing photographs into the suitcase. And while they did this, clearly they discussed what their objects were, why they'd chosen them, and then each group presented their suitcase to the other groups. After this, we created a story. We created a story based on a photograph. First, we did a soundscape, a city soundscape. Then we observed this photo. Actually, I've done this with different photographs. This is the most recent one. And it's actually interesting to see how the story changes. In here, we have a young woman and her suitcase. I did also have an old man and his suitcase, and the stories that came out were very different. So the students simply observed this photograph. Then they were told that this was somebody who they can see from their apartment window who's been there, for hours and hours. And so they, in their sort of apartment block, they start gossiping about the mysterious person with the suitcase. Then I entered, or one of my collaborators entered as a teacher in role, and the students asked questions. In many cases, it appeared that the person with the suitcase had been suffering from memory loss for some reason, but various other, it's always very unpredictable. That's another thing to say about any kind of drama approach. You don't really know where it's going until you've got there. After this, the students engaged in activities like a still image of what has happened, the explanation for this situation, a short improvisation, and then the conscious alley, the end of the story of this person with the suitcase going on to his or her next destination. As I say, a multitude of stories emerged. What was important, as I've said before, is that at every stage, the students then reflected and talked about what was going on. The final discussion, once again, the languages came in because this suitcase workshop, hinged on this idea. I mean, it's clever in English that you've got belonging and belongings. Belongings, the things that you possess, and the things that make you feel that are, have an emotional attachment, as you would have an emotional attachment to a place where you feel that you belong, or a community, a group where you feel that you belong. And we talked about this in different languages. It was interesting conversation, and how students offered different language, different versions of the word, maybe not the direct translation, but words which for them seemed to encapsulate these meanings. And we talked about how these words related to the workshop. Now, just to read, because I think obviously it's always interesting to see what the students noted about these activities, and I'll read these to you, these short comments which we glean their insights from a questionnaire. We were all from different countries. We were given tasks of sharing our stories together pertaining to incidents related to suitcases. I believe that while sharing the aforementioned stories, we also shared some intricacies from the cultures that we belong to. And it goes without saying that since we interacted so much and participated in so many mini activities together, the suitcase was indeed related to intercultural communication. Here, I liked these comments because I think it takes us back to what we were saying also about empathy before. The suitcase is what we bring with us to a new place. Once again, this first sentence, what we bring with us to a new place. So, the idea of focusing on intercultural dialogue, not as a problem with misunderstandings, but something we do, bringing our language and cultural resources with us. The emotional baggage we hold, the objects we give value to. As individuals, as people that come from a certain culture, I was able to learn more about people and their background with the information I learned about their suitcase. I'd like to say that for me, the topic was interesting because I already think about emotional baggage in an imaginary suitcase. Now we put the cultural baggage into it. I believe it's important to add it to our suitcases. There's no way to separate those now, especially we are living in a multicultural city and constantly interacting with people from all over the world. So putting in their emotional and cultural selves into this suitcase. Once again, here, a similar idea emerges. To me, it was as much a head scratcher and also an emotional roller coaster. So something to think about and something to feel. It was fun and interesting to learn about other people and the baggage they held within them, but also emotionally overwhelming. I believe I was able to understand so much more about cultural diversity, and I was able to find ways to relate to people from way different cultures from mine. So now I move to my final reflections and bringing some of these points back to ideas related to inclusion, the idea that this is something that in our, given the background of our students, we have to think about. We have to create a caring university where students from various backgrounds are included and feel part of the environment. And now I'm actually, I've got these 4 points, and these I was inspired by student reflective papers, going back to when I said the various workshops that I carried out. With my master's degree in English studies, students, they had to write a final reflective paper, not just about this workshop, but about the drama approaches that we'd studied in general. And these 4 elements were themes which emerged from their papers, which I think are interesting. Those of physical engagement and presence, safe, brave spaces. So the idea that you feel safe to do something, but also you can take risks, which is necessary in any kind of learning, language learning, obviously. Creative self-expression, and finally coming up to change through collaboration. Now, as these are 2 student comments. So one says that when students physically engage with the language, they connect with it on a deeper level, making the learning experience more immersive and memorable. I think this immersive experience is important for inclusion. And I soon realized how embodying a text, for example, eased me into any activity we were being proposed and dramatically improved my overall mindfulness. It taught me how to be more present in the moment, both within the classroom and outside during my alone time, especially my day-to-day interactions with other people. So here we've got this idea of being present in the classroom, and this is a way to foster interaction. As regards our safe, brave spaces, one student noted how drama allows students to approach more serious topics such as social justice and work on breaking the stereotypes without the threat of losing face or being ridiculed. And another student who talks about the fact that drama provides learners with a platform for self-expression where they can explore and express their thoughts, feelings, ideas creatively and imaginatively. I think it's important. These are their own thoughts. And this, once again, is a way of enhancing inclusion. And finally, I was interested to see how the collaboration in drama activities was also perceived as an agent for change, for future change. As one student noted, I made lots of international friends here. Surely there's potential for more collaboration between us in the future. So she's looking ahead. Learning from their experience will provide me this opportunity to expand my visions beyond boundaries and learn regarding the latest update in my field and teach them to future generations of Afghanistan. So here, a final quote, just as my, let's say, take-home message for the presentation. Here I'm talking about drama, performance, embodied approaches, but as Bell Hooks points out, teaching is a performative act. And as she says, and it is that aspect of our work that offers the space for change, invention, spontaneous shifts that can serve as a catalyst, drawing out the unique elements in each classroom. Here, there is a bibliography for people who are interested, and that is where I would like to stop and see if there are any questions. Thank you very much.
For this presentation, I'm trying to find out if there are any questions from the chat, but at the moment there aren't. So, yeah, I've many questions, but I don't think we have the time. And also, some of my questions might be too going too much into practical details or something. But what I was thinking about was, for example, as we have recently experienced our first worldwide pandemic and not being together in the classroom, because I can imagine that within the classrooms, the exchange is very active and very vivace. And was wondering, because you were talking about the Suitcase activity and about the workshop you have tried out also within the Arcus Alliance for staff, as a workshop for staff. How is it possible, and is it a good way to, and is it easy to organize? To organize in distance as well, or is the classroom a very vital part of it?
Well, I mean, I think obviously, as we've all learned from the years of lockdown and the pandemic, everything's possible. And, it was a first experience for me. And this was actually related to my, the theatre group I mentioned, where we work at a final performance. And, we started out in the autumn of 2020, and then, we were on 2019, sorry, in the autumn of 2019. And then in 2020, we were thrown into lockdown. And I know with the theatre director said, oh, well, let's give it a go. We didn't, we weren't experts. Nobody was experts, with the online platforms. And so you manage and you find ways of trying to gain the same benefits. And I think what we did is we tried to make the most of the means itself. And so, we had, students, in fact, they were very inventive also, and they would do short improvisations where they were in Zoom, and they would use the, turning on and off their videos in a conversation, a Zoom conversation, improvised Zoom conversation. Or else, they would make the most of being able to use different backgrounds. I had one particularly inventive one was, they were improvising something happening in a museum, and they found the backgrounds of the actual paintings for this museum. And then what happened in the story was that the participants were kind of absorbed into the paintings themselves. So they used the technology to create these effects. And I think, obviously, a lot of, not just for language learning, but a lot of drama practitioners found themselves having to invent things. In fact, 3 colleagues of mine, I can plug another book, have just published a book called Digital Displacement, which is a book of essays. The subtitle is Reinventing Embodied Practice Online During the COVID-19 Pandemic. So, there are ways, there are things that you can do. And we manage with the Suitcase obviously it changed, some things change, but I think the improvisation helps, and you can find ways also online.
Yeah. The suitcase is actually, just the image of the activity. I mean, just imagining the activity is showing how much this type of approach helps to bring something of themselves for the participants into the room. Might it be the classroom or the online platform or whatever? But I mean, I don't think there are many other ways to bring so much of oneself into
The classroom.
learning. Yeah.
Another thing, I mean, this, if you think about, very often people are using Zoom, and one of the, things about Zoom, which is different from being in a classroom, is that everybody sees
Everybody.
people in a different order. And we had, actually talking about language learning and giving instructions, and this was once again an idea of one of my students, so thank you. And then we sort of adapted this. He decided that he wanted to get with their sort of bodies and their arms, he wanted to get all the students in the group to make a certain image. I think we did a heart, but also we did other things. And so, they would start off, he was giving instructions, such and such a person, you've got to do this, someone else got to do this. And it all got very complicated. There were lots of laughs. And but that was another sort of Zoom-inspired drama activity, which was good for language learning in the end.
And another question, as I'm still the only one having questions at the moment, another question I just want to quickly ask is about the teacher and role. Are there any specific roles a teacher should choose or not choose or avoid? And how important do you think it is? Because, like, as one of the techniques to use, being in the classroom, that was the one that might be, that just jumps up.
Yeah, no, I mean, teacher enroll, you don't have to have the teacher enroll every single, session, but it's a technique which can really help in language learning to elicit responses. Now, the teacher can, play a variety of roles. The teacher can be, as I've said before, of a lower status, let's say, or the non-expert, or the teacher can be on the same level as the participants, or, a higher status, an expert in something, and the students want to find information. I think, limitations to what the teacher does not play related to the drama in general. I mentioned at the beginning this idea of, emotional distancing. Clearly, especially, I've also done work with adult migrants, and clearly here it's important, first of all, not to create situations that you then can't deal with. I mean, as it was, you could see with those comments, one student said this was emotionally overwhelming, and obviously any classroom, any learner centered activity can release emotions which were unexpected. But in one author in particular who's written about distancing is Erickson, and Erika Piazzoli's written a lot about this idea of getting the distance right. So you're involving students in the story, but at the same time, it is a story. They're not playing themselves. They're not being themselves. They're another person in a situation that they can relate to. Otherwise, you wouldn't get the interest. And maybe here I could mention, a workshop which I did for about 5 or 6 years ago with Erika Piazzoli here in Padua, with adult migrants learning Italian. And the process drama story, which they all said was their favorite, was that of a refugee situation. The difference being I was the refugee. And we actually, there was not only a role, change, but we also set it in a future time. and we were talking about migration flows from north to south. So I was a refugee from Iceland who had arrived in Padua, and they played various roles in the reception center, and somebody was, also there was a press officer, and there was a driver, and there was a secretary, and they interviewed me, and that was very revealing, and it was actually emotional for me, being in the role of the newly arrived refugee, who I have to say was welcomed and was given a very, very warm welcome by these in this reception centre, which
Good
was
for that migrant.
But anyway, having said that, yes, I mean, you've got to, also, I think in this, once again, going back to this refugee context, we want to, another issue is to get away of this discourse of victimization. And I think what was really interesting in this particular workshop was how the agency of these refugee students, which they have, I mean, and maybe denied it, but they have a lot of agency, their agency could come to the fore.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Do you have any other questions?
I mean, I have upcoming questions which are overlapping and stuff, and might ask them in another moment. And also, like, if there's any question from the audience, maybe later also you will have a look at the comments and then might answer to those questions later. Thank you so much for having given this presentation, which was very, very interesting. Very welcome. And thanks for everybody who was attending, and yeah, have a great holiday.
Yes, happy holidays to everybody.
Happy holidays.
Okay, bye. Bye-bye.
Bye.